evening, everyone. Pursuant to Section 54956 of the California Government Code, a special joint meeting for the workshop of City Council and Planning Commission is hereby called for 6 p.m. on September 1st, 2021. It does look like we have a quorum for both the City Council and Planning Commission tonight. So, Margaret, if you could give a roll call for the City Council.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Here.
Councilmember Meyer?
Here.
Councilmember Rary?
Here.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez?
Here.
Mayor Bryant?
Here. Okay, we do have a quorum. If you could give a roll call for the Planning Commission, please.
Commissioner Cross?
Present.
Commissioner Dolter? Commissioner Dolter? I see him there. Commissioner Roberts? Commissioner Ziegler?
Here.
Commissioner Dolter? Can you hear us okay? It looks like the Planning Commission members are present and that Commissioner Dolter is attempting to connect to audio.
Okay, so visibly, there he is.
Is Commissioner Roberts?
I don't see Commissioner Roberts. I'll have her marked as absent and mark her as present when she signs on.
Okay, so at this time, we do have a quorum of both the City Council and Planning Commission. Tonight, we're meeting for Zoning Code Workshop, a discussion of preliminary draft use regulations. Use regulations specify which land uses are permitted, conditionally permitted, or prohibited in each zoning district in the city, and include special requirements, if any, applicable to specific uses. The preliminary draft may be revised based on input received, and the preliminary draft is available at www.brentwoodzoningupdate.com. I am going to now turn this to Terrence Grindal, our Assistant City Manager, to provide the staff report. Terrence?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council and the Planning Commission. Happy to be here this evening. Wanted to give a brief overview of this process, and then hand it to the city's consultant to go in more detail. So first of all, what we're talking about tonight is the use regulations, and there's no decision to be made tonight. Tonight is a chance for the council and commission and the public to provide input, which will then be taken into account and addressed for future discussion. So I want to be clear. This is an opportunity for input, not a decision point right now. At some point, the zoning ordinance will come to before the Planning Commission and the City Council, but just wanted to be clear about that. When we embarked on this effort, we're dealing with with the zoning ordinance, which was last comprehensively updated in 1987. The city's population was 7,000 people at that time. In addition, in those decades, there's been a lot of changes in the state of the art of being able to make a zoning ordinance effective and clear. The goals were transparency and the promotion of economic development for the community. We entered into it with certain principles, which we heard from the community and from the council, which was to stick to the general plan land use, no changes from that policy document. The reflection of the general plan into the zoning ordinance needed to be clear, but I wanted to state that was one of the key principles we went into it, and that's what we've done here. In addition, we wanted to make sure there were minimal changes to residential areas. The bulk of Brentwood is single-family residential neighborhoods, and we really wanted to minimize any changes in that environment. Second of all, we've heard from the council and from the community a desire to have more control over the commercial uses within Brentwood. Issues like about the concentration of certain uses, and the fact that the city's zoning code right now doesn't provide us the ability to do that. So, in that regard, we're trying to address that, trying to provide the community control over those kinds of uses, but at the same time, trying to be friendly to small businesses and friendly to economic development opportunities. So it's a balancing act. If something's permitted by right, there's very little control over the use. If it requires a high level of review, such as conditional use permit, it can cause delay, cost, and even and actually commonly discourage investment in our community in the very areas that we'd like to see it. So one possibility is to create a balance by creating sort of a mid-level review, and we'll talk about what you would call that, but a review that would make sure that uses that were proposed were consistent with the vision of the zoning ordinance and the general plan without an undue burden of cost or time to small businesses and property owners. So in this ordinance, staff is proposing, because of what we heard from the council, an expansion of the control of the community over uses, not a loosening, but we want to do it. We're proposing that we do it in a way that doesn't impact our economic development objectives. Martha, can you change the slide? So tonight's discussion is about the uses to be allowed within particular zoning districts. It does not change the zoning on particular parcels. As I indicated, our policy, our vision is to keep consistent with the general plan. And these policy decisions are for the city council. Staff has put them forward. This document was made available to the public in May. We had a open house sort of workshop for the public around that time, and we've now brought it before this joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the City Council. So just wanted to frame those discussions. That's what we're doing tonight. But also, once more, want to reiterate: this is the opportunity. Staff wants to hear from the council and the commission about ideas and concerns that you have about the draft document. We're not going to be finished tonight. There's going to be lots of opportunities for further input. So with that, I'd like to hand this over to our consultant, Martha Miller, to talk about the use regulations document.
Terrence, before you do that, Council Member Mendoza has a question.
Certainly.
I did talk to someone on staff about this. I'm a little bit concerned about even moving forward right now. When we left the last meeting, we had made a request. The grids that exist in the zoning update today, and replicate that grid for were those things allowable now, right, versus what you're proposing. We have not received that. So I guess we can wait and see Martha's presentation, but my goal is to go through each box and go, is it allowed today? Are you allowing it tomorrow, in the future? Are you doing it today? Are you allowing it in the future? So is that the goal of this meeting, or how do we know every single item without getting a comparison grid?
Yes. The goal of this meeting is not to go point by point. I mean, obviously, the night would be very early morning before we got done. The goal is to explain the ordinance, sort of provide you and the public and the commission an understanding of how the zoning ordinance is structured, and then to get whatever input that we have. If the council wants to tell us that a particular use ought to be a conditional use, or that a particular use really ought to be permitted, if the council can tell us those kinds of clear directions, we can incorporate them. But there will be plenty of opportunities for a line-by-line discussion, as you referred, that we can do in the future.
And you've heard me say before, I hate a bait and switch. I don't want to do a bait and switch on any resident. So we were told we were going to get the comparison grid. We did not get a comparison grid or a red line. What do we have to do to get a comparison grid? Because if we're going to vote on something, I want to be able to tell my residents, I know exactly what all of the changes are, and I am not sneaking anything in. Because let's be honest, that's what people think. Like, we're doing this because we're going to sneak stuff in. And we need to be able to wholeheartedly say, no, here are the changes, and let me tell you why we did these changes. The benefit to the city or the legal requirement to the city.
Mm-hmm.
So can we get something like that? Because I feel like the last meeting was a little bit of waste of time. And I'm thinking this one, we'll go through it, but I still need that information. And we can have a meeting, but I would prefer it come to me. I can sit down, highlight, make notes, and then our meeting is more productive when we sit down.
That's good input. What I'd suggest is that the consultants sort of stay high level and policy level in her discussion, in her presentation. That will make it more valuable tonight. However, we're also open to getting particular input from the council. But as I said, there's going to be many opportunities for further input. A zoning ordinance is very important, and it's also very complicated. So, staff applauds the commission and councils for the detailed look at this, and we will work with you on a detailed, kind of line by line approach. But we'll try to keep our presentation here to a higher level.
Okay, so when do you think an ETA is for a comparison chart? Like everything I have in here, when can I get a comparison grid?
I'd have to discuss that with the consultant. There may be resource issues involved with that as well. So I can't give you a time. I can't give you an ETA right now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rary.
In the draft document, it says the overall approach to the zone scheme in the updated code is to implement the general plan and be consistent with applicable plan developments while minimizing the total number of individual zones. So we're not getting rid of any plan development, correct?
We're going to talk about that in the. I'm sorry for the noise. We're going to be talking about what land uses, what zone districts are in what areas in a future discussion. So today we're only talking about what the use regulation should be on within particular zones. We're not talking about that. There is, I will say, there is desire from staff's point of view, to move away from PDs on every commercial area, and to have more certainty and transparency to the property owners and small businesses. However, that's staff's take on that, and when it's time to present that to the council, you'll have the opportunity to give your input.
Okay.
And make that change.
I'm completely against getting rid of the PDs. That's my personal opinion on there. People bought into their homes knowing what was going to be around them. And for us to turn around and say, no, it's commercial. We can move it out of there and they can do whatever they want on there. That's a huge no. But the other thing is that I like Councilmember Mendoza. The last meeting was a complete waste of time. I'm hoping that this one is more. I've also, I got a notice that this was posted May 13th, and I recall at the last meeting saying, really, what's going on here? Why haven't we had this full document to look at? Or at least I recall it being that way. So I think it's not fair to residents to say, oh, well, it's been there since May 13th. Why didn't you know about it? It's been up there for that period of time. This is something that, we could have made a much better post on social media. If it's been up there since May 13th, why, a couple times a month, saying, hey, make sure you look this over. We're going to be having a meeting. Save the date. Those are a little bit of frustration areas for me on this. I hope today's meeting is a little bit better. If you want to see my document as far as what I've gone through and put sticky notes all over regarding this matrix of what changed and what hasn't, I'll tell you, we will be here till the wee hours of the morning. A lot of these things didn't even make sense. They just didn't make sense of why some were ministerial and others were permitted and others were conditional use permits all in the same line. And how we ended up with campgrounds in our city is beyond me, as well as mobile home parks. We currently have mobile home parks, but why we would include that in zoning for future items is really boggling. Thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sparley.
Thank you. Terrence, my only feedback that I concur with both Councilmember Rary and Mendoza, and I don't think we're being as transparent as we could be, or as transparent may be the wrong word, but to make this process as easy to understand for the casual resident who is, who may hear about this, and it's a lot to take in. One thing that might help is, you said there'll be plenty of time for input and future meetings, is if there was some sort of schedule that was laid out that could be posted, so that, we're meeting tonight, but what's the next meeting? What's the purpose of the next meeting? The meeting after that, right? So that there's a sequential approach so people understand the process a little bit better and where they can provide feedback. I think that will help folks who don't always attend but have interest. We got a letter today, obviously, from a resident in the Deer Ridge area that just saw this for the first time and gave asked some good questions. But I think posting a schedule like that could be helpful to avoid that type of situation moving forward.
Thank you. We'll do that.
I don't see any more questions. Back to you, Terrence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for those comments. Martha, can you provide your presentation about the use regulations?
Sure. So I wanted to start with just kind of a brief reorientation to the project and give an overview of the approach and the process, and then a summary of the preliminary draft use regulations, which is really the first kind of large section of preliminary draft of the regulations for the update, and kind of describe what the individual components are within that, including the definitions of uses, where and how uses are allowed, and then the standards for specific uses. And in looking at the preliminary draft of the use regulations, and there's just some things to think about as far as input to give and questions that staff has to make sure that as we go through the process and revise that we're meeting kind of the Planning Commission and the City Council's needs. So if there's any comments or concerns with the list of uses, those that are permitted, those that are conditionally permitted in each district, if there's some that, currently aren't permitted or aren't allowed that should be, or vice versa, should there be additional limitations? Maybe a use might be okay as long as it's, there's some separation, or it's a certain scale, or has certain hours of operation. If there's any specific uses that are a particular concern that really need to have their own set of standards, and then the concerns and discussion with the minor use permit process, which we can talk a little bit more about. As Terrence said, the purpose of the zoning code update is a comprehensive update of your zoning code, which is Title 17 of your municipal code. So it's part of your regulatory code that you have to really to create that concise and user-friendly set of regulations to implement your general plan. The general plan is really what gives the zoning ordinance its marching orders. So everything needs to be consistent with the general plan. So we did start the project in 2020, and we've been doing research and assessment. The last time we were actually before your group was in February, and that was talking about the policy issue paper. So since then, we did the preliminary draft of the use regulations, had that up on the website, released for the public to look at, and then had the virtual town hall where we walked through the document, similar to what we'll be doing tonight. So that was what occurred in May. And I know you all have been busy with a number of initiatives that you've been working on. And so we're back for a study session before your group to go through the use regulations again. So this is kind of that, as Terrence said, the start of the conversation on it, to get you oriented, acquainted with it, and start to hear the concerns and, maybe something you like about it, something you like and don't like, but so that we can revise it appropriately as we go through the process. So what the use regulations are in a zoning ordinance is they specify which land uses are permitted, conditionally permitted, or prohibited within each zoning district within your city, and also state whether there are special requirements that may apply. So the document includes basically definitions of the uses, also called use classifications, but those are really define what the uses are. And then they describe where and how those uses are allowed, as well as if there's specific standards that apply to certain types of uses. So I'm just going to start kind of first with the last section of the document, which is the use classifications or the use definitions. And I just want to introduce those because those are really, they're at their end because they're the reference material, but those are what defines the land uses regulated by your code. So currently, your code really lists out kind of every separate use, and there's no consistency between the districts or even with your planned developments of what uses are. So sometimes they're called the same thing, single family dwelling may be called that, but then other times there's different uses introduced, and then there's no set of definitions for them. So you'll wonder, well, what is a notions store or something like that? And if you go to the definitions, that's actually not defined. So that's hard for interpretation, and there's not a lot of consistency through that. So what the preliminary draft use regulations has is that set of, okay, here's the set of land uses that the code, regulates, all the uses and identifies whether they're allowed or not, and has a definition of them. And then the definitions are designed to describe kind of broader categories so that they're organized based on common function, product, physical characteristics. So you're not calling a bookstore something different than a stationery store, which is different than, say, a paper store. When it gets that specific, it's really hard to kind of track. So those would collectively be referred to as retail. So that's the approach with it. And those broader use groups allow for the consideration of new unanticipated uses. So someone comes up with a new use, something nobody's anticipated before, staff can ask questions of, well, how does it operate? How does it work? And then you find the group that it fits that it's most related to. So that's actually the last part of the document. That's if you're ever going through those tables and you say, well, oh, what is an eating and drinking establishment? You go back to that last section, and that's the description of it. So the real meat, though, of the document is the where and how uses are allowed, and that is the use allowances per the zoning districts. And so the use allowances are presented in the tables. And so what the tables have are the districts across the top, and then down the side are the land uses, which, correspond to those definitions. And then within each cell, it says whether something would be permitted, whether a minor use permit would be required, a conditional use permit, or if the use is not allowed. And then there's cross-references if there's other standards that apply specifically to that use. So we introduced the minor use permit process, and I think Terrence alluded to this in the beginning of trying to have that mid-level of review that your code is currently lacking. So your code right now says something's either permitted or a conditional use permit. And in kind of the interest of expanding the types of things that would require discretionary review, but at the same time, not having to have everything go automatically to a planning commission hearing. So kind of trying to strike a balance with discretionary, but at the same time, some streamlined review. The minor use permit process was introduced, and the idea was that the city could apply conditions, there'd be public notice, but there would be a hearing if somebody requests one, and that could be the applicant, a community member, a decision maker. So we understand that there's been some concerns with the minor use permit process, and I think one thing staff wants to understand, because then with those concerns, staff is saying, well, maybe there's a different approach to that. So with that, in looking at this, I think staff would like to know, are there certain standards or performance measures such as separation requirements, limiting hours of operation, that could be included to reflect your direction, reflect your concerns, be objective, and require less staff discretion than that minor use permit process. But that's just something to kind of keep in mind. The minor use permit process right now is in the draft, but we do understand that there's been some concerns expressed about it. So the use tables are grouped by zoning districts, which are intended to implement the general plan land use designations. And we have the correspondence chart of, the zoning districts to the general plan land use designations. And the maps included are of the general plan land use designations. They're not the proposed zoning map, and I know staff is still kind of working through an approach for that. So while these are the corresponding districts, it doesn't mean that that's how the city would be zoned. So just, I think Terrence alluded to that as well. But it does give some context of kind of why within the corresponding districts, the types of uses are allowed. So the first set of zones are the residential zones, and those include the ranchette estate, very low density, medium, high, and very high density general plan land use designations. So when you look at the chapter on the residential districts, it starts with purpose statements. And it's, the purpose of this zone, of the RE zone is to, and describes that. And those purpose statements relate to the general plan land use designation. So if you were to compare kind of the two, you'll see some very close similarizations.
Excuse me.
And then the tables. Oh, yeah.
If you could, during this presentation, if you see one of the hands for the council or commissioners, if you could address that during this workshop, that would be helpful. I know it's a little awkward right now on Zoom, but that would be helpful. Hopefully all these are germane and quick so we can get as much information as possible, but that would be very helpful. Thank you.
If I miss it, just stop me. But Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Rary.
Yes, on the residential high density, you've got it listed in there, 20.1 to 35 units per acre. Currently, ours is 20.1 to 30 units. So why are you increasing the amount of density in our current, I thought this was changing the names, not changing densities or anything else. And you've included a density. Now, our very highest density that we have had was the multifamily, very high density residential at 15 to 35 units per acre. And that was in our PA1 specific plan. But now you have one listed here that is skyrocketed above at 35.1 to 50 units per acre, which we've never had before. Is there change our general plan to accommodate these higher residential?
So the density numbers reflect the general plan. So your current zoning districts that you have may have a lower one. I do believe that the very high density.
This came straight from the general plan. I took these right out of the general plan.
Right. And I believe the very high density residential one, and Terrence, maybe you can jump in. I think that was in anticipation of housing element requirements for.
Well, it actually is addressing the fact that some parts of the PA1 specific plan have a very high density, and it incorporates that. As Councilmember Rary indicated, it's the only place in the city that has those very high densities. But there are portions of the specific plan area that indicated densities up to that amount.
No. But, and I'm looking at page 76 of our general plan under residential very high density, and that says the permitted density range is 20.1 to 30.0. And you've got it as 20.1 to 35.0. So where's the difference between what our general plan states and what's actually in your document?
Well, first of all, when it comes to the very high, we will double check, but that is my understanding from the specific plan. We will double check that. The other use, Martha, do you recall why it goes from 21 to 35 instead of 30?
My recollection was that was in anticipation of the meeting housing element requirements. Right.
So it sounds like we may want to rethink that and stick more directly to the existing general plan.
Yeah, the whole point of this was to change the names and group things, not to change densities, not to change uses throughout and that was what you explained at the beginning, that this is not a change to the general plan, that this is just a regrouping and changing of names and making a more defined table of content than what we currently have. So if we could get that change, I'd appreciate it. And that higher density, I don't know about the rest of the council, but that needs to go, because there's nowhere in our zoning that we have that. And until we can really let the public know about this, have discussions between the council, that higher density has no place in this document.
Both points are well taken. We will again. I do want to double check. My understanding is there are some small sections of PA1 that have it, but I could be incorrect. And of course, I know that many of the council members were intimately involved in its development. So we will confirm that. But your comments are well taken, and we'll incorporate them.
Councilmember Mendoza.
Yeah, I have to echo what Councilmember Rary said. This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. I sent staff a chart directly out of the general plan of what we have today and what is after. And residential medium density is new. That's 11 to 20. Residential high density is been adjusted from 11 to 20 to 20 to 35. And residential high density has been adjusted from 20.1 to 30 to 35.1 to 50. So I would like to see all of the densities change back. And if you need an area that's going to be specific, can't we just do a PD for that or something along those lines? I don't know the exact way to do it, but I don't want up to 50 in our general plan. I think that should be an exception for a project like, PA1, but it shouldn't live in our general plan. The other thing I'm extremely concerned about is there's no more midpoint. I think I brought it up last time, like we still want our midpoints and the midpoints still aren't there. Our midpoints protect us from having too many units in an area that might cause traffic issues. So I'm not sure why we are getting rid of the midpoints, but the midpoints is something that I don't know how everyone else feels about it, but I'm pretty passionate about the midpoints. So I would like to see those back. And again, if we're going to say we're following our general plan, then let's do it. I mean, Councilmember Rary looked at it. I looked at it and I sent a chart right after our last meeting comparing the two. So this is where I'm saying we need a comparison of before and after, because this is what you're saying isn't true. And it's concerning to me, not as a council person, but as a resident. Like if I were sitting on the other side, I'd probably be screaming at my computer right now. So, it's just frustrating. It's super frustrating.
No, I hear you, and we'll make those changes. I do want to clarify that the discussion of midpoints actually lives in the general plan. It's never been in our zoning ordinance, and it's not being changed. So the discussion of the fact that being above the midpoint of the density range requires a special process is not changed. That continues to exist as it has in the general plan.
So nowhere in our zoning does it reference midpoints?
Correct.
Okay.
Terrence, in the PA1, the transit village did have 25 to 40, not 35 to 35.1 to 50, but that was a mixed use up to 6 stories for the transit village, and the transit village was in one specific area which they have now eliminated in the plans that they're creating. So yeah, there was one for 25 to 40, but not 35.1 to 50, and it was specifically in the PA1 specific plan, and it shouldn't be this residential very high density.
No, understood, and we'll make sure it conforms. So thank you for these comments.
Councilmember Meyer.
I think you just called my name. Missed the last part. I'm not going to talk just for the sake of saying the exact same thing, because I agree with what both council members are saying, but I did want to question the lack of midpoint in the zoning document. I don't understand. Maybe you can help me understand why that's not included there. But I also want to reiterate that I don't feel that we can make these changes with any sense of transparency, because we do have residents that pay attention because they really care about these things, and I want to make sure we're not switching something without being very, very clear about it. And in this case, I don't think it's necessary to switch. So I'm glad to hear that those comments are going to be incorporated in. But please clarify the midpoint, the lack of midpoint in the zoning document. Thank you.
Yes. The idea of the midpoint was something that was developed as a part of the last general plan. It was never incorporated into the zoning ordinance. The general plan does set the rules, right? It's the policy document, and that's not being adjusted here. So that's where that concept exists now. It was never put into the zoning ordinance. When a proposal is brought forward, as you've seen with development proposals that expect to go over the midpoint, there's a discussion and a finding that needs to be made that there is, in order to be consistent with the general plan, that there's certain benefits provided to the community. And again, this is something that is going to have to be addressed as in the housing element, but we don't need to do that now.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry. No, I was going to say, if we're making changes, does anything keep us from putting it in the zoning? Like, let's just make it official and it lives and breathes in two documents, the zoning and the general plan. Would that be possible?
Yes, we'll look into that.
Okay.
I did want to address one point. Maybe I'm getting down in the weeds, but Councilman Mendoza, you'd indicated using a PD to increase the density, and we can't actually do that. But I think you even alluded to there being other mechanisms, and we'll look at that. But I just wanted to indicate we can't use the PD to actually increase density. The density is a hard cap. So if the density of an area is 20 units to the acre, you can't do a PD to make it 25.
Okay. The other reason I was concerned is because if I look at that brown section, residential high density, and then we look at the map, it lives, you have a section of that color over by Deer Ridge across from that big Stewart shopping center. And so would we want 50 unit density there? And we also have one south of Trilogy in that color. And when I saw that, I was just like, do the residents there even know that this map exists and they're contemplating making that 50 units per acre?
Right, and again, what we're talking about tonight is the use designation when it comes to the actual translation of the general plan to the zoning. There's going to be a whole detailed discussion of that and a map that we're going to produce in large format so people can see exactly what's going on and tell the difference of the color. So, but that's not what we're addressing tonight.
Okay.
Could just a clarifying point, if that's okay. Through the map that you were looking at is the current general plan map, and I know it's confusing. So again, the general plan has its density for residential very high. This is the zoning chart that we're looking at here, so I know it's slightly confusing. None of this has been mapped. There is no zoning map yet. That's to come.
But shouldn't the zoning map just be reflective of what we have today, right?
So we do have a zoning map today, but we haven't created a new map with these new residential use regulations because we haven't finalized them yet. That's what this conversation is. With all of these categories and all these new land use names and designations is what we're getting your feedback on. So none of this has been placed on a map yet.
Okay.
That's not exactly true, because if you looked at the Deer Ridge area where in the map that you sent to us, it actually shows that there is a under review with a whole different color, and I think there was a couple other items on there as well. So it's kind of deceiving them, because we're receiving some that are from the old and some that are new, and without you differentiating those for us, how do we know which ones are new and which ones are old?
Understood. I agree. It is confusing, and I don't think it's been presented in a very clear and concise way, and we are definitely going to fix that going forward. I hear that. Thank you.
Ms. Miller?
Okay. And then within the tables, the land use, residential land uses are allowed, consistent with the general plan, and then with some limited allowances for public and semi-public type uses and some limited agriculture uses. One caveat is in the residential very high district, there's certain commercial uses allowed in limited capacity in mixed-use developments subject to conditional use permit approval. So for commercial zones, and these include your general commercial land use designation or would correspond to general commercial and regional commercial land use designations. And this is the area with the regional commercial.
Sorry, we have another question. Sorry.
Sorry, I might not be understanding the process, but I thought we were still talking about residential, because there's questions I have on these grids on the residential. Is this the time? 13. Hi, are you there? There you are. I have questions about 17.01.
I'm sorry, it's cutting out on my end. I don't know.
Martha, can you hear me? This is Terrence.
I can hear you. I couldn't hear anything else.
Yes, hopefully, Councilmember Mendoza's connection seems to be weak, but she wants to continue to talk about residential issues. So could you back up the slides and when she gets her?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay or no?
Now I can.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'm sorry, I didn't know we were done with land use, but I just have questions. Like there's some things that I'm finding in here, like just where all the P's and the M's and the C's are. Is that something we're reviewing today? Because like mobile home parks in residential areas, do we allow that today?
Yes.
And where can because I tried to find it in our code and I couldn't find it in our actual municipal code. And then schools, private, like do we have a code for private schools? Because we just went through that whole thing with the private school and commercial, but do we allow private schools everywhere?
I believe that's our existing, I believe that's the existing designation, schools in residential areas.
Okay, so I think that maybe once we get the grid comparing it, maybe that will help take care of this, because that's where I'm wondering is, did we allow this before?
I understand, and we'll produce that for clarity.
Okay, thank you.
So should I?
Yes.
Are you ready for commercial? Okay. Okay, so this is the area in your general plan for regional commercial, and then the other areas are general commercial. And I think what Terrence alluded to in the beginning was, narrowing the list of permitted uses and that are permitted in each zone, and then having a review process for others. And this really stems from your general plan land use designations, which really correspond to a fairly specific type of land use, and then identify typical or secondary other uses. And so your general commercial land use designation talks about typical development being commercial centers with an anchor tenant, and then secondary uses. And then your regional commercial talks about having regional centers with major anchors and complementary uses. So thinking of that and how to implement that, what the tables aim to do is allow that core land uses are permitted. And then complementary ones, or the secondary ones, are land uses are allowed either on upper floors, because if they're on upper floors, it's pretty clear that they're secondary type uses, or on the ground floor with that minor use permit approval subject to specific findings. And then other uses would require a conditional use permit or be not allowed. And then there's some requirements for separation requirements really aimed at precluding an overconcentration of certain types of uses. So that's the idea with the approach for the commercial zones and the uses that are allowed or require either a minor use permit or a conditional use permit.
I have one question on this one, sorry. Liquor stores, the state has a 600 foot distance. Why is ours 500 foot? Why don't we do the 600 foot to be in line with the state?
You could have a 600 foot limitation.
So that's something we can say we want to align with the state. Okay.
And the next set is the employment zones, and these relate to your business park, professional office, and industrial land use designations. And the colors are a little off in the mapping, but this is your one area of industrial land use designation is up here, and then the business park and professional offices are the other purple areas. And so kind of similar as the conditional or the commercial land use designations that have complementary and secondary, the purpose statements for the employment zones relate to the general plan land use designation, which in professional office talks about the offices, the business support activities, and other similar compatible issues. The business park designation talks about the research parks for corporate establishments, allowing a wide variety of uses, including selected complementary commercial activities. And then industrial has industrial manufacturing and service type uses. So again, the similar approach, although it's a different kind of concentration of use. The core land uses are permitted, and then complementary ones require minor use permit approval subject to those specific findings. And then other uses would require conditional use permit approval or are not allowed. So in your review of the uses, I think the input that staff would want to hear are, is the treatment of those uses appropriate? If you do not want to go forward with the minor use permit process of it, are there standards that could be put in place, objective standards that could address your concerns for those types of uses? And there's a question.
Meyer?
Yeah, who would have the final sign-off for minor use approval?
It would depend on whether somebody requests a hearing. So if the concept would be that public notice would go out with the conditions of approval would be attached and go out for public notice. If somebody requests a hearing, it would go to the Planning Commission. If no one expresses any concern, then it would be the director or zoning administrator.
Right, and these are uses that now are permitted with no process at all. So this isn't providing this isn't taking a use that requires a CUP and making it a director approval. It's taking a use that now is approved, has no oversight from the city, and providing at least a minimal level of oversight, which gives the council and commission and citizens a chance to call for a hearing if they wish.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rary?
That's not actually accurate. I mean, I'm looking at quite a few here that have M's and P's there where there was no permitted uses in the business park and public facilities. I also have concerns with the emergency shelter being in a business park, or animal boarding, animal shelter and boarding, or a pet daycare in a business park. Those are more regional commercial or general commercial. And some of the things that are lumped in, if you go to the community assembly, you have union hall. First you think community assembly, okay, that's not bad, religious facilities. But then you see that they can have union halls in there and community centers. And community centers, again, not bad, but a union hall, which is then available, could go into a residential neighborhood. Now, the religious facilities, absolutely. Community centers within a park, yes. But to allow for a union hall to go into a residential area, and I guess some of my other questions or concerns I had was to Terrence's point that he said that we only changed the uses that were already there, and And this is where my concern is that we're now allowing ministerial decisions on things that that were never even allowed in those areas. One such thing is automobile vehicle sales and leasing. That one is ministerial now. And it's so hard because this chart is so, for business park. So again, I think this is going to be one where we have to go down the line and see where these decisions were made. Another one is indoor entertainment and recreation is now ministerial in an area that was never had it before. So yeah, there are a lot of concerns in here regarding how this charting went through and why allowed uses are being put in there that weren't there before, and at the staff level for approval versus going for a conditional use permit.
We'll look into those situations, and as we said, we're gonna be able to provide a sort of line by line correspondence.
I almost feel like we should continue this meeting until we have that line by line view and we have time to review it. Because I don't know what the ask is tonight, but right now there's nothing I would sign off on right now.
Again, there's a lot of information to provide. We're not asking for a sign off at this point. We hear you loud and clear. You want to see the detail, and we'll get that, and there will be a further discussion. But I believe there's definitely information in terms of background and high level discussion that is valuable that the commission and council should hear, in my opinion.
Millie?
Okay, so then the last group is the public and semi-public zones, which include the public facility, semi-public facility, community college, and school, which are all very kind of pretty intricate land use designations, which could be a zoning approach combined into one zoning district. Don't need to be. You could split those out as if you'd like. Permanent open space and park land use designations. So again, the purpose statements at the start of the chapter relate to the general plan land use designations. The public facilities district provides for that range of government, institutional, educational, assembly, community serving uses. Parks and recreation have the park and recreation facilities for various sizes, functions. And then the open space is really about preserving the land for open space, habitat protection, drainage, and recreation.
Commissioner Sparling?
Thank you. And I'm not sure if we're going to get to this or if this is the appropriate time to ask the question, but a resident of Deer Ridge asked some very direct questions on the current zoning of Deer Ridge versus what appears to be on the map. Can we get answers to those questions? And if not now, at what point tonight can I get answers to those questions to make sure the resident gets answers? Because I know it wasn't on the agenda, that specific question, but I think they are good questions, and I know a number of people in Deer Ridge have similar questions and concerns.
Alexis, do you want to take that or me?
Well, I sent the email, so I'm happy to take it. So thank you, Commissioner, for your question. The gentleman was looking at the general plan map, and he was correct about the general plan designation, but not about the zoning designation. So it's still a plan development, PD 20. It's still in that plan development, open space and golf course. So the general plan map is what he was looking at. There's no changes to that general plan map or as of yet, the zoning map. Again, that's what we're here to discuss. And in the future, as Councilmember Berry mentioned earlier, there will be discussion about what we do or don't do with the planned development districts in the city, both residential and commercial. So that's also a policy discussion that we need direction on. Right now, we're just talking about base zoning districts in the city. Does that make sense? Or do you?
It does. I guess, I don't want to pile on, but I think the general plan versus what was sent out and causing the confusion, it's disappointing. It's all unnecessary, and there are people, a large amount of people, specifically in the Deer Ridge neighborhood, that do not trust what the city does, and they know, as I know because I live in Deer Ridge, that there's something that has been submitted at some point, whether it's an official draft or not, I don't know. And so some might feel like, is the city trying to shoehorn something in, by the way, this appears to be, but is not. So that's unfortunate, and all could have been avoided with better communication. And I hope that gets addressed moving forward, because otherwise we're going to have some long meetings regarding the zoning in this specific area.
I apologize.
Commissioner Dolter, I've actually had spoke with staff in great detail on this, and this was several years ago. And my understanding from staff was that in 2014, during the general plan update, they changed all golf courses within the city to semi-public facilities. And that's why the change is there, but it is further detailed, as Alexis has said, that it's further detailed through the PD 20 or whatever the Brentwood Golf Course or Shadow Lakes as to what actually can go on those areas.
Just to touch on the mapping and the confusion, I 100% understand, and I do apologize again. This is, a very complex undertaking that we're doing, and we're taking our guide from those general plan land use designations, and that's why those maps were included, because those are the guiding land use designations that we're trying to build this zoning ordinance from. And it is, I understand, confusing that those maps are in here, but we're talking about zoning. And I completely understand that, and we will correct that going forward. Again, this is very complex, and the way we present this information is very important. And if we do it incorrectly, like you said, it can lead to lots of confusion and frustration, and that's absolutely not my goal going forward. So we will 100% redirect how we're presenting this information, how we're describing it, and be much more clear and concise going forward. That wasn't our intent tonight. Our intent was just to show the general plan maps and how we're building, but obviously we didn't achieve that, and I apologize.
Commissioner Dolter.
I'm asking these questions for the benefit of the public. I want to stay out of the policy weeds here, but regarding PDs, how many PDs do we have and how are they adopted?
I'm sorry, I'm having camera issues tonight. I apologize. Eric Noltenius is on the line. He knows exactly how many we have. We have over 50 in the city, but he can give us the exact number. They are adopted over 70. He just texted me.
Okay.
So for a city of 60,000 people, that's, if you think about our borders and how much land, that's quite a few PDs to administer. They're adopted, they're rezoned, there's some kind of base zoning, and an application comes in to rezone it to a planned development district for that particular project. So they're approved through Planning Commission to council by a zoning action. Yes, and they're codified.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
By ordinance, and they're codified in our municipal code. Each PD is in our municipal code, and you can see the standards for every PD by number in the city.
Then, if you wanted to get rid of them, you'd have to go. Your zoning ordinance, in some way, would have to amend all of those ordinances, correct?
If you wanted to get rid of every PD in the city?
Well, the ones that you wanted to get rid of, you'd have to do it by ordinance.
You'd have to rezone properties, yes.
Okay, then the question is, it seems to me that within every one of those existing PDs, you have you're likely to have a whole bunch of non-conforming uses with the new ordinances adopted, when the new zoning ordinances is adopted. Is that correct?
Possibly. It depends on and how precisely you go about it, how detailed it is, but that is possible, yes.
Is there a definition of non-conforming use yet in the new ordinance?
There will be that section we're drafting right now, so we haven't presented a draft to you yet.
Okay,
but there will be a new non-conforming ordinance, yes.
That definition is going to have to be exceedingly carefully crafted, and I'm sure legal counsel knows this. The other question for the benefit of the audience that might be listening is, I live in Trilogy, which has severely restrictive CC&Rs, and I'm sure that there's a lot of other residential areas and commercial CC&Rs as well. How does any of this affect those regulations? Because I don't think the city may have a shot at in an initial application of looking at proposed CC&Rs, but I don't think it has anything to say or do regarding amendments that our homeowners association here or a commercial association might make to their CC&Rs going forward. So in some cases, this is all very interesting, and we need to do it because we have to be consistent between our zoning ordinance and general plan. That's a requirement of state law. But, you know, we still have communities that have pretty strict CC&Rs, and I don't think the zoning ordinance is really going to affect those, and thank goodness in many cases. Is that a correct assessment?
That is accurate.
Yes,
that's accurate. The city does not, the city does not dictate what happens in the CC&Rs. That's an agreement among property owners.
The other observation I have, based on the comments of the council, several of the council members, is that we may want to adjust the existing general plan for the controversial areas that I think that are going to be pointed out through this process. The existing general plan is going to have to be amended so that we don't run into trouble of adopting a zoning ordinance that's consistent with a general plan that has some deficiencies in it. For example, if there's a high density, a very high, or any kind of a high density location on the general plan map that's anywhere near Trilogy, I can assure you that is going to be very difficult. And if that is there now, it's going to have to go before you adopt a new zoning ordinance, or else we're going to have a big uproar out here. For example, and I'm sure that situation exists other places as well. So I think you can look forward to some general plan amendments before this new zoning ordinance goes into effect, or you should do it, anticipate that.
Mr. Mayor, if I could chime in for just 1 minute. Good evening. I just want to remind the council and the commission that we have a fairly narrow focus tonight on the draft use regulations, and we certainly want all the input we can get. But to be fair to members of the public who understand that we're limiting the discussion tonight to the use regulations, it would be very helpful if we could stay on that track tonight. So I thank you.
Mr. Dolfer, I'm sorry, Commissioner Dolfer, I can state that is something that we'll take into consideration when the actual map is brought forward to the commission. So as the Assistant City Attorney indicated, we can't really talk about that in detail, but that is something that will be discussed. However, the changes in the existing general plan is something that is something we're quite wary of, but it's something that it is an issue that will be discussed in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Meyer.
Thank you. Taking Katie's comments into consideration and the questions that have been raised so far, I'm sorry to go back to Deer Ridge. I'm going to keep it very brief. I know this is not about Deer Ridge, and we can't focus on one particular parcel, but Councilmember Rary mentioned the 2014 discussion and the verbiage, but I don't believe at that time it was ever put into writing. my question too about lumping open space and protected open space into one category, that's confusing and can be misinterpreted. But I mentioned as well, given all of the state laws that are coming forward about housing and zoning and density, that anything around any of our golf courses, I just really feel that we have to be so very careful in our zoning of them so that they don't end up being something that can be changed without our approval. And I know that's on everybody's mind already. I'm just mentioning it because of all the Deer Ridge conversation. I think we've got to be just consistent across the board on that and really very clear about it so that there isn't any potential misinterpretation when it comes to state law and the acceptance of that on a local level. Thanks.
Councilmember Rary. Councilmember Rary, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. It's interesting that there's been talks about possibly eliminating planned development. And even in your draft document on page 36 of the agenda, or on the draft document, 17.040.040 applicability, the uses that are subject to the standards in the chapter are allowed only when authorized by the planning permit required by zone, specific plan, or plan development regulations, such as conditional use permit, except where the chapter establishes a different planning permit for required use. So I still have concerns that we're gonna, I mean, if we've got a specific plan, we should be sticking to our specific plan. If we've got a plan development, we should be sticking to our plan development. If there's areas in the city that don't have any of those areas, then maybe using this for zoning of those specific areas that are not in PDs, are not in specific plans, would be a good idea, but not where it comes to the PDs and the specific plans.
Councilmember Rary, we hear your concerns, but I want to repeat before Katie has to step in again that that's not really part of what's agendized today, but we do hear your comments, and that will be part of a future discussion. We do want to stick on the use regulations themselves. So, but we hear you.
Okay. So the last section of the draft use regulations talk about are the standards for specific uses. So these are standards and requirements that are applicable to particular uses that have either specific needs or potential impacts surrounding properties. This is the kind of list of all the uses that have those standards for specific uses. There are some that the existing standards are to be carried forward, and then others that are new and or revised, including accessory uses, including provisions to allow accessory uses that are incidental and subordinate to principal use. And I see a hand raised. I don't know if that was from before or if that was a new hand raise.
It was before.
Okay. Alcoholic beverage sales, a new section to highlight police department review, the need for that to make sure that doesn't get missed. Animal keeping, new provisions to allow and include standards for beekeeping, as well as standards for community gardens, for family daycares requiring a minimum 300-foot separation between large family daycare operations, new standards for the management and operations of farmers markets, home occupations, some revisions to allow up to 2 on-site clients at a time, up to a certain amount per day, and now there's a new hand.
Sorry, I'm trying to get your alcohol beverage sales. Can we add this? And I'm not sure what the difference is between this and the other part of the document, but should we add the 600 feet here for alcohol sales, or does that live in every other part of the document? Like, I
would recommend putting it by the use require requirements, so it's right away when people are wondering if they can do it or not, they know that that requirement's there. This is in response really existing requirement, but it was kind of getting missed sometimes, or so staff's desire was to put this just to make sure it was stated.
Okay. And the small animals, we allow small animals now, right? This is nothing different?
Correct.
Or no? Okay. Thank you.
You do have allowances now for animal keeping, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Mobile home parks, and just the discussion mobile home parks were mentioned. These are existing standards that were really kind of simplified, removed redundant provisions, and the this is to keep those standards, and these are I'm not sure the timing of the standards and the timing of your mobile home parks, but to keep the standards and requirements the same. Outdoor dining and seating, new standards would allow, sorry, there's a hand again, and is that a new one?
That's
old one. Okay. Outdoor dining and seating, new standards to allow that as an accessory use up to 600 square feet, allowed without additional parking. Outdoor display and sales, new provisions to allow for it, but they have size, locational, and operational requirements. Personal services have some limitations of hours unless authorized through a use permit. Standards for recycling facilities, including reverse vending machines, collection facilities, processing. Standards for temporary uses such as garage sales, seasonal sales, special events. These are kind of in your code in various kind of ways. The idea is to consolidate and update them for clarity. Tobacco retailers, new standards that have locational limitations and, kind of restating requirements to be comply with applicable law. Some of those locational requirements, like this one for tobacco retailers, was to address that concerns about overconcentration of certain uses. So before I go, just want to check for hands before I go that. The draft use regulations, they are available on the website. We also included a couple intended to be helpful users guides on there, including just a project overview handout, which explains what the zoning code is, kind of generally what the process is, as well as an overview of the use regulations, what they are, and how to navigate the table. So those are intended to be helpful guides to help people kind of navigate through the document and, be in a position where they are able to give some input and feedback. So those are available on the website. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll hand it back to Terrence if there was anything that I missed or that he wants to kind of highlight before discussion.
Actually, I'm gonna further hand it down to Alexis, if you don't mind, Alexis.
I don't have much to add other than, just to reiterate, this is the beginning of a process. This is a proposal, a very preliminary draft to give us a starting point for discussion. And we've already heard some comments and feedback. We can proceed with further discussion. We also have public comment on the agenda to open it up for comment. But there's no decision tonight. This is, the start of a discussion, and we've, which direction we want to go in, those bigger picture policy questions that Martha mentioned earlier. We can get in the weeds about the table if we have time, or we can come back to that. We're at your disposal to see how we want to move this forward based on your direction. So that concludes our presentation.
Alexis, before I ask for further questions from either council or commissioners, I do have a question regarding expedited CUP process. I'll give a quick example, and you tell me where it might fit. Say there is a tea room or a reading room that has an auxiliary component of selling wine, for example. That is way down the list of what services they provide, but they may want to have an application in just to be able to sell wine. Is there a way that we can create an expedited CUP for not just that, but other similar things that doesn't get rid of our abilities to control completely what goes on, but doesn't put an undue burden time-wise or financially on a small business that may just want to add to what they're providing for the community?
Yeah, possibly. And again, that's part of the discussion of which uses we would want to regulate at which degree. So all use permits are public hearings and require discretionary act. Currently, they all go to the Planning Commission. A minor use permit is something that would be approved by staff, a zoning administrator, the community development director. That was the original proposal, but it's not the same as a use permit. So an actual conditional use permit would go to the Planning Commission. You could have something like a zoning administrator, which is still a public hearing noticed. It may go slightly quicker just because Planning Commission agendas can be a lot more difficult to get on because of workflow. So yes, there's a possible way to do that if that's the majority of the council's direction. It's just a different process than we have in place today in the city of Brentwood. And part of that is dependent on staff resources, to be honest. There's still only 3 planners, right? So the more processes we create that require some sort of staff report and review just to kind of fit into that queue. So it's difficult to expedite things with a fixed amount of resources, right? So those are all the things that we would have to discuss to see if that kind of process could be implemented. But something like that is possible, yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendoza.
I agree that it'd be great if we could have something expedited, but I think in our world right here, we can run into hiccups, and we just know a CUP was adjusted and did not come to planning, and I've heard about it when I'm out and about in public. So I don't know what that, I just don't know what that happy medium is, because what you and I might feel is like, oh, not a big deal, just do it. We don't know what other people are going to feel, and they might not be happy with it. So I don't know. I don't know about the expedited one. I'd rather be detailed and do the right thing that the community wants sometimes. But I don't know. I mean, it's something we can talk about when we get to that point.
Commissioner Sparling? Commissioner Sparling, you're
Can't hear.
About the 10th time I've done that today. Sorry about that. I'm assuming we'll get to this at some point. It was brought up earlier in the meeting, and so we have an area that's zoned for a certain area or a certain type of business, but in the past there's been concerns by residents about too many of one type of business in Brentwood, right? So and I'll just use gas stations because that's the one that was the most, probably created the longest city council meeting. Where in this process does that go? Is that something that the city even has an option for, or is it zoned for that area? And I'll use Chipotle as another example, right? We just approved a great project a few weeks ago. But if another Chipotle wanted to be put in here, that would be 3 in Brentwood. And I love Chipotle, not picking on them, but I don't know that we need 3 Chipotles in Brentwood. That type of example, where does that come in this process?
This is Terrence. The gas station example. This is the place where it would happen. For example, the commercial zone should, if the council and commission want to have control over those uses, it should be listed as permitted as conditional, and the code can also include some allowances. For example, it's a conditional use permit but one of the issues that has to be addressed is adjacency to other gas stations, right? The one thing we can't do, and when it comes to a brand name, is we can't pick on a brand name. We could talk about the concentration of personal services, for example, but we can't say Betty's nail salon. We can only have one of those, right? We have to be more fair and equal and apply the standard equally. But there are ways to address that issue. And again, from an economic development perspective, we want to make sure we don't make it an onerous process, but at the same time provide the commission and council the ability to shape the commercial environment the way you want it.
Councilmember Ware.
Thank you.
I too have a question regarding that. So could we, by way of this chart with gas stations and car washes, which we don't need any more of them, can we just not include them as a permitted conditional use permit or ministerial anything on there? Do we have to include it? The conditional use permit, if a gas station leaves that area and another gas station comes in to take its spot, that's okay. I mean, it's already got the conditional use permit to allow it to have a gas station there. But for us to keep approving gas stations in town, can we just eliminate it from our from the ability to even do it?
The short answer is yes, you can. There has been discussion when it comes, to get down into the weeds of gas stations, and I hope Katie doesn't cut me off. That on Sand Creek there may be need for a gas station. So I'm not sure a citywide prohibition is necessarily in the best interest. However, there are tools such as overlays that we can use to guide gas stations into the few locations where they might make sense, and that's something we can look at.
If there are no further questions or clarifying questions right now of council or commission to staff, at this time, then we will open public comments, and I'll turn it to you, Margaret.
At this time, the public is permitted to address the City Council and the Planning Commission on this item only. I received 2 written public comments on this item. One I received after the summary was prepared. So a summary is shown on the screen here. They will be posted to made available on the City Council Agenda's webpage. If you wish to speak under public comment, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature and I'll call upon your name if provided and unmute you to speak. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. While we encourage your comments, state law prevents the City Council and Planning Commission from discussing items that are not on their meeting agenda, and if appropriate, staff will follow up on them. Oops.
I'm sorry, did we need to show comments? They didn't show up on the screen.
Oh, you know what? I need to share my screen. Sorry. Thank you for that reminder.
No problem.
I have 2 speakers. The first speaker is Keith, followed by Rod. I'll go ahead and unmute Keith now. Keith, go ahead. Keith, you're unmuted. You can go ahead and speak. I'm not hearing anything from Keith. I will go ahead and move on to Rod and come back to Keith. Rod, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. Oh, my God. 3 entire minutes to talk about something so complicated. The staff and the consultant can't even come in here prepared to answer detailed questions. There's so much to this. It's so complicated. And this is how much you care about public participation, is that people get 3 minutes to comment on it. I can barely even form a cogent thought on something this big in 3 minutes. This needs a town hall. This needs maybe 2 town halls. But more than that, this just needs to stop. This is crazy. What are you people doing? What do you have in your heads that you think we need to be doing this right now? We've had conversations over the last year about could we spend a little money to help Deer Ridge? Could we spend a little money to help our teens? And how much money, how many billable hours have you paid this consultant firm? My taxpayer money as a homeowner here, I'm just offended by all of this. This is craziness. It's a threat to Deer Ridge for sure. And I'll remind you, I am the co-chair of the Deer Ridge No Rezone Committee. But it goes way beyond that. This is beyond the pale. I mean, I have never seen anything like this. You people are crazy to even be talking about this. We have so much to do. We're at 75% of our population capacity in this town. We don't need to change right now. What we have left is we have a lot of infill to do, and what you're doing is you're making it a whole lot easier for developers to come in here and build any damn thing they want in any little nook and cranny they can find to make themselves a little bit more money. That's what this is really about. It's not hard to see. Have you lost your minds? Just stop this. Just send the consultant home and tell the city staff to get back to work, do some planning. This is the opposite of planning. This is opening the city up. It's presented both ways. Oh, it's so complicated we can't discuss it. Oh, it gives us flexibility to consider new things. But on the flip side, oh, it makes the decision-making so easy because things are predefined. You have to do this. You have to do that. It makes no sense, even on the surface of it. I've never heard anything like this. And if anybody thinks that I've been coming at this city too hard, vote for this. You know what? Just pass this thing and see what this community is going to do, because we sent 3 good council members up there to get the community involved, make smart decisions, control our growth. We've got the state breathing down our neck, and you're wanting to loosen, increase densities at a time when the state is trying to cram more houses into our backyards. It's crazy. It's insane. It's nuts. Stop it. Just stop it, because having seen what I'm seeing tonight, I'm not going to be silent anymore. I've been trying to be quiet, but this is too much, and people are not going to like it. Thank you so much.
I'll go back to Keith. Keith, are you able to speak? I don't have any audio from Keith, and I have no additional hands raised.
Thank you. So at this time, we will close public comment and move into council and commission discussion. Councilmember Meyer?
I would actually just like, in response to Rod's comments, I'd like staff to clarify why this is happening now, why it appears to be a rushed process that's being rolled out the way it is. Can you please comment on that?
This is Terrence. I'll start, and Alexis wants to chime in. That makes appropriate too. The existing land use regulations for the city of Brentwood are an impediment to our economic development. They're unclear and difficult to work with. So the imperative here is to streamline that process. Our zoning code is difficult to use. It's not transparent. The property owners and small businesses deserve to be able to know what they can do with their property and not just have a big question mark hanging over it. And if we have regulations like that, it really gives us a bad name when we're trying to attract businesses to our community, and it impedes the commercial goals that we're trying to bring forward. I would also take some exception. What staff is proposing is to actually tighten regulation on commercial uses, not to loosen them. We have made note of the concerns about the translation of the densities, and we will certainly make sure before we come back to you that that's addressed. But that there is no opening of the floodgates. We actually want to provide more control. Alexis, is there more you want to add?
I just wanted to add that the process started in 2020. The city applied for a grant from the state of California, an SB2 grant, as they're known, to pay for the consultant's time to do this. Under that grant, it's been extended. We have until the end of 2023 to finish this project. In the past, being new here, I don't want to misstate anything, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding was in the past, this was a strategic initiative of the city council, and that is what drove sort of the pursuit of the grant and the start of this project. So I just wanted to add that clarification of how we got to where we are today. We applied for the grant last year, we're awarded the grant, awarded a consultant contract, and we're here today, and we have till 2023 to comply with that grant. This isn't something that we have to do. This is not a requirement. This was something that council wanted to do, several years ago, and we proceeded on that path, but there's certainly no obligation to do this other than tuning up and being up to date and having best practices implemented in our planning department.
So just to continue my thoughts on this, the bigger priorities were commercial, not as much residential.
I was speaking with my economic development hat on, so of course the city's economic development strategy was a key part of that. But yes, there's never been a strong interest in streamlining the process to produce residential development in Brentwood. The issue is finding a way to make sure that commercial development and employment generation can happen without impediment.
So I know you've heard from a few council members and I think also commissioners tonight about the density concerns, and it seems pretty clear that we're all wanting to put a very tight restriction on any changes there. So I want to make sure that's reiterated to the public who's listening, that isn't going to be, like you said, a free-for-all, just opening up and letting the floodgates go for residential zoning changes. That's not the plan, correct?
Correct, and I also would point out that as a further part of this plan will be the development of objective standards for residential development that the city presently doesn't have. So that's a very important element that the council and commission, and these standards are essentially required by state law so that the city can have control over its design. So there'll be an extensive discussion that will create requirements that will drive that will be able to make sure that development that occurs in Brentwood happens on Brentwood's terms.
And I think that's a really important thing to make note of, considering I'm sure you're all aware how the population of California right now is extremely upset about these housing bills that have just passed. There are more housing bills still being presented, so this is a very hot topic for all of us, and I can completely understand the concerns of the residents when it comes to that. We have to do whatever we can to tighten everything up. So that's just critical on the open spaces, on the golf course lands, on all of that. Understand that. My last question for now was regarding the grant. You mentioned that its end date is 2023. I'm wondering how you see this process going, if we slow things down so we can be sure we're doing our comparisons the way that we need to and looking at the pre's and the currents and all that, and the spreadsheets. How is it looking for us meeting that deadline? And also, was the consultant paid for by the grant?
Sorry.
Yes, the consultant was paid for by the grant. And we will take the time it takes. The end of 2023 is out there. I will say though, probably if it runs that long, there may be additional resources needed for the consultant.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Councilmember Mendoza.
When you say there's an impediment to bringing businesses in, why didn't we tackle that instead of the housing part of it first? Like, why didn't we just focus on that? Because I honestly don't think there's a problem with the zoning for housing. Like, I used it a ton. I don't think there's a problem with it. Like, I would prefer just not even to touch it at this point. But when it comes to businesses, what businesses have said, forget it, I don't want to be in Brentwood because of your zoning?
The first part of your statement, we about residential, we hear you. We have a zoning ordinance that was last comprehensively improved in 1987 and a general plan that was done in 2014. So there is that we do want to assure that there's consistency, clear consistency and transparent consistency between the documents. So that's the primary goal when it comes to residential. I can't give you specific names of businesses that have turned away, but I can tell you that daily, well, if not daily, weekly, I talk to businesses trying to explain the land use process, and the question comes up: can I do what I want to do on this property? And it sometimes takes me a meeting with planners and deep research to be able to determine whether or not that's something we can do in the process that they would have to take. Sometimes these uses are things that we'd like to see happen. So at least from an economic development perspective and from your economic development strategies perspective. So I can't give you particular names, but I will say it happens all the time. We're explaining our regulatory process to property owners, even which are Brentwood property owners and also investors, is very awkward and difficult. And we have to basically do a dance, and we say, no, we welcome business, really we do. Even though it looks like we don't, don't worry, we're pro-business, and we'd like to have that. We'd like to have that clarified so that we can attract the kinds of business that were identified in the economic development strategy.
Okay, because it's just without examples, it's hard. Right now, I'm like, maybe we can talk about that offline, because I'm just afraid that we're going to start getting businesses that maybe we don't want, and that's why we have such a tough process. We have expectations in Brentwood. We have hurdles in Brentwood, right? We don't want to be just any other city that allows everything. So, I know there's a happy medium, and we have to do that dance, but I just want to be careful of what we're doing and making sure we're protecting our residents, that they don't get businesses that they're not happy with, is all. And I don't want to make that easier. And I want there to be full transparency. After hearing what I'm hearing, I'm like, it sounds like things are not going to come to planning as often. Things are not going to come to council as often. And some people are fine with that, right? Some people don't care if it comes to council or planning as long as they can check a box. I'm not that person. I think you guys know, I would rather get into every single detail. So I know that your previous council asked for this, but you have a new council, and this council is very, very different. So I don't know if this project shifts in the way we do it because of what's going on now, or I don't know. I don't know what we do, but it's just a little concerning to me that we might be opening floodgates to things we don't want to be.
I understand, and that is absolutely not our intention. It's in fact, on the contrary, the economic environment of a community can be hampered by the wrong business as much as it can be by a vacancy. So we totally get that. We want to streamline the process for the businesses that we want, businesses that create high density, high quality employment, and discourage and control businesses that don't provide benefits to the community.
Okay, thank you, Terrence.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez.
Yeah, Terrence, a quick question. I know one of the speakers had mentioned doing town hall meetings, and I could see that there was a town hall meeting on May 13, 2021. It was a virtual meeting. Do you know how many people participated, and did that the town hall virtual meeting, did it cover a lot of the things that you're discussing tonight, or was it not covered? I'm sorry, my stuff's blowing everywhere here.
It's all right. You're enjoying the Brentwood evening. Yes, the same issues were discussed. Martha, do you remember the number of people that attended that meeting roughly?
I don't remember. I don't remember if it was 20 or 30 or.
And only a handful of people spoke. I just rewatched the video recently. Only a handful of residents spoke. It was a town hall, so there was no time limit. But given that, even that, there was only several residents who actually spoke during the comment period.
And a lot of the same information that we're covering now, Terrence, was actually discussed, huh?
Yes, it was. But I'm, if the council directs us to hold another town hall on this meeting, we're happy to do so.
Okay. No, I just know that one of the, speakers had mentioned that we should host a couple of those. So I know there was one that was already done. And did you think that town hall was effective, Terrence, or do you think we may need another one, or what was your, after putting that one together, what was your outcome that you thought was it positive, or could we do more?
It was. I felt it was positive at the time. I'm having some doubts after hearing from at this meeting. So, the proof's in the pudding. So it's always good to have more outreach, but without unduly slowing down the process. But given the concerns that have been expressed, more detailed information about the changes to the zoning tables. And another town hall may be the way to go.
Okay. Thank you, Terrence.
Councilmember Rary?
I think what might be helpful, in addition to having another town hall, is to also provide us with a map that shows what land is open still for development, and include any pending applications that are in on that. So, that we know what is coming in and what we have left open. There's not a whole lot of land that's left in our town. And so it'd be good to see, what are we really doing all of this for? I mean, are we spinning our wheels here for, hardly anything? And again, I think moving away from our planned development is a huge mistake. People bought into areas specifically based on what would be around them. I also had some concerns regarding business parks and allowing retail in there. Now, I can understand having restaurants in there, coffee shops, things like that within a business park. But we have general commercial and we have regional commercial for the retail elements of that, and we should try to steer them over to that versus allowing retail into the business park and professional offices. In addition, we've got cemeteries listed here and mobile home parks and campgrounds is another thing that I think we should really look at removing from a allowable use within our city. So those are the comments that I have, and thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sparling.
Thank you. I mentioned earlier, and I'm based on what's happened this evening, because I don't want to beat anybody up at all. I don't want to overstep my bounds as a commissioner. I don't want to do any of that. So I'm probably going to come up either at that line or maybe cross it. If I do, I apologize. But I don't find this meeting has been particularly productive. But I think one thing perked my ears, because I do listen to what everyone says during the meetings and the comments from presenters and what have you. Terrence, you just said something that perked my interest, which was, and you said we could run out of money in 2023. Right, if it goes that long, and there may need additional resources, which is, I assume you meant funding for this project. Mm-hmm. I think what I had asked for or suggested is a calendar moving backwards of when the city wants this completed by, with the steps in the meetings that are going to take place sequentially, so that not only the city council and the planning commission understand, but also the staff or the citizens, because some citizens may not be interested in commercial development. They may only care about open space, right? And laying out that plan will help you budget to make sure we get done on time, that it's not rushed, right? And it's done the way with the intended, the intention that you guys have, which is to update everything. Because when you said this last time this was done was 1987 when there were 7,000 residents, I mean, we have to update this. But we have to do it right, and we have to do it as quickly as we can and as transparent as we can with clear communication. And I don't think that what was presented tonight was your intention. But we need to do better for all of our time, and we need to do better for the residents as well in terms of moving forward. And I think town halls, whether 3 people speak or 100 speak, are an important part of that progress, especially after this evening, because I have a feeling there's going to be some folks, rallying some people to attend future meetings now because of some comments that were made. And I think that's great. So I really think we need to have a tighter, I don't want to use the word marketing because that's not what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to just update this and make this what you want it to be for economic development. I get it. I agree with it. Got to be tighter. Thank you.
So that's great. And I definitely am taking notes about some action items. So before we and your calendar or schedule is on my list. So I'm gonna list off those action items to make sure there's consensus on the council and commission that we need those things. But I've heard you.
Commissioner Ziegler.
Thank you, Mayor. I've listened to a lot of people, a lot of comments tonight, and there's a lot of things I absolutely agree with. I could obviously name every single council person that spoke and every planner that spoke and things that I agree with. I'm looking at this whole event tonight, and I agree with Commissioner Sparling. I'm trying to figure out what we accomplished. And I'm not saying it wasted time, and I think the city's gotten some feedback from everybody as to when we're going to have these meetings, we need to be, for lack of better terms, more prepared with answers and more detail, because we understand that this group, very obvious, asks a lot of questions and wants a lot of the details, and we're not seeing that. And so it's very hard to make any type of a decision or have any kind of relevant discussions without really having the information in front of us where I think it should be. But one of the things that for me, when I take a step back, and I'm hoping this doesn't go too far away from the intent of what we're going through here, is we are talking a lot about the residential. When I think about Brentwood and I think about what's left to develop in Brentwood, there's very little residential to develop in Brentwood. There's very little infill that's left in Brentwood. Where we need to be focused and where part of this document may come into play is economic development. All I've heard from is economic development, but I'm trying to figure out where are we doing the economic development here in terms of saying, okay, we don't want gas stations over here, or we don't want dry cleaners or something like that. But I think we need to get back to the roots of where this city is going to prosper the most and work on this document to make sure we are truly developing things that are going to be business friendly. That, like Terrence, you said, is we need to make sure that we're business friendly, and we want to make sure we hold high standards, absolutely bar none. I mean, that may discourage some people, but that's okay. But at the same time, we need to make sure we are business friendly. When we have things ready, we do have a lot of things that are very valuable to some, but I don't think we're using the tools and leveraging the things we have to bring that sort of business in. And maybe that's part of this document. I'm not sure. And like I said, maybe I'm talking in the wrong realm here, but I feel like that's where we need to be focused on, not especially when I think it was Councilman Meyer made the comment about, all the new housing laws coming down. I don't know what's going to look like here in 6 months from right now, and we don't have the crystal ball, yet we're trying to make some changes to a document which absolutely needs change from 1987. Don't get me wrong there, but it's like, is this the time to be doing that part of this when we have a lot of things that are coming down right now? Can we make those informed decisions to be able to do that when maybe we can address some of the other things more on the commercial side of things and focus a little bit more on that side with the help of the outside folks that we've hired and things like that. And I have to agree 100% with Commissioner Sparling in that, we have a timeline at the end of 2023 where things run out, and I agree 100%. We need to set some timelines in place and say, what is our end goal? And then let's back up from there and then start setting timelines and timeframes and due dates on things. Because if we say, well, we got to be done by 2023, well, guess what? That's an arbitrary, that seems like it's so far off, it's going to catch up too quickly. We've got to be more prepared and come up with distinct objectives and guidelines and timelines when we want to accomplish things and have check marks and checks and balances in place to make sure those things are getting done in that time frame. And one, I think it saves money and it makes us more consistent and precise. And again, I agree. I think town halls can be another excellent advantage or necessity based on what I'm hearing tonight and based on it sounds like some of the other ones weren't well attended, not because maybe they weren't advertised, but maybe it was the time of day, whatever it is. But I think we need to make, not saying the city hasn't, but we need to make available to those that want to participate in the city, because we know we have a lot of people that want to nowadays, and give them every opportunity to participate and hear their voices. So, again, I'm sorry if I kind of went off in the wrong direction there, but
no, that's fine.
Kind of my thoughts.
Terrence, I do want to also echo that very thing. One of the things that we have to be really mindful of is the first core reason that we want to do this is to make sure that we attract the right businesses, high quality businesses, to keep our families, the people that are commuting here, bring those kind of jobs here. We want clarity in the requirements. We don't necessarily want to reduce the requirements. We want a business to be able to see that this is where our business can be. These are the requirements that Brentwood has, and they're clear in the messaging. Yep. That gives us greater control, not less control, and that's absolutely essential. And we've got to keep our eyes as well on, like the commissioners and council members have already said, in addition to keeping our eye on what's going to be happening from the state in residential changes, there are going to be some commercial changes that are coming as well. We need to be ahead of that so that anytime those requirements are put out, we have the structure in place that we can defend ourselves so that we can have the Brentwood that we want. And like, all of our council members have said tonight, we have the right and we have the obligation to protect Brentwood, to make it what our residents, our community, our families want it to be. This is the process that we do that with. We absolutely have to have a financial and threshold and timeline and work backward. That's what we did with the general plan. We had a deadline that was absolute, and it was met. I think we have to do that with this. Focus on the commercial aspect of this first, and include what we can with the residential as well. Make it very clear. These are requirements that we have. These requirements are clear. If you can live within those requirements as a business or a developer, wonderful. If not, there are many other places that you can go to take your businesses and developments. But we've got to make sure that we hold the line on our general plan, that we update all of the components of the process that are updated in 1987. All of those things we have to do. I think that's really clear messaging. And so the next time that we have one of these meetings, we can have more than just general input, but a clear game plan of exactly what we're looking at and exactly how to get there. Is there any other conversation from council or commissioners at this time? Okay, I want to thank all of you for your input very much. So at this time, I need two separate motions. One from the Planning Commission, a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, can I take
Oh, yes, please.
I'd like to read back sort of what I'm hearing from action items, just to make sure I captured it. We are going to be producing an explanation of all the changes in the table. So It'll describe where the change came from, whether it was something that was brought in from the general plan, whether it was something that it was required by law, or whether it's something that we're proposing to expedite development. So we're going to be producing that. We're going to be providing for the council a schedule with deadlines. We're going to make sure we have a focus on commercial, and we're going to take a second look and second pass to remove uses like cemeteries and campgrounds that may not be appropriate anywhere in Brentwood. So those are the action items I'm hearing, and also that we would be bringing forward a town hall to go over that additional information along with this document in the future.
Did I miss the density part of that? Were we looking at?
Yes. Also, thank you, Councilmember Meyer. Yes, and we're going to be taking a closer look at density and making sure the density in the zoning ordinance matches the existing and general plan. And where there's any difference from that, we'll provide an explanation.
Did we want to add the midpoint to this document to match the general plan? I don't know how anyone else feels about that. Because that would be, I mean, if we're saying it's not clear to builders, like now it's crystal clear because it lives in both spots. So, and then...
let me just promise to provide a discussion of that. It may require city attorneys weighing in, and maybe a privileged discussion. So let me just commit to a discussion without necessarily doing that at this point.
Okay, and then can we make sure that anywhere in the document, any kind of liquor or tobacco matches the minimum state regulation? We shouldn't be more lenient than the state on those things.
Yes.
And there's something else that I can't remember right now.
Well, Councilmember Mendoza had requested some information that she wasn't able to receive for the meeting today. Is there a way to have that information before our next meeting? I don't know exactly what that was. Yeah, I don't know what exactly that was, Councilmember.
I think that goes with his first bullet point explanation of all of the changes. So I think it's going to be the grid you see now, a mirror of that grid with what did that exist before, and then all of the explanations. And that way we could quickly see, like maybe conditional formatting, red, green, like if it changed or something. That way we can quickly see what the changes are. Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Dolter?
Mr. Mayor, I think you referenced the need for some kind of a schedule going forward, given the deadline for the grant.
Yes, that was part of my statement that you need.
Any other information or comments at this time? Again, thank all of you very much. Thank you, Terrence, staff. So at this time, for Planning Commission, I do need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
You have a first.
Commissioner Ziegler.
We have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Cross?
Aye.
Commissioner Dolter?
Aye.
Commissioner Sparling?
Aye.
Commissioner Ziegler?
Aye.
Motion carries with Commissioner Roberts absent.
Okay. Do I have a motion for City Council for adjournment?
So moved.
We have a first.
Second.
And a second from Councilmember Meyer. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Mendoza?
Yes.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Rary?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rodriguez?
Aye.
Mayor Bryant?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimous.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Be safe.
Thank you.
You too, Mayor. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.